You're a senior who's been diagnosed with fatty liver. You know it's not healthy and can predispose you to other conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and even liver cancer. What do you need to eat in order to lower your liver fat? That's exactly what you learn in this video. But first, let's discuss what is fatty liver. There are two major types of fatty liver. One is called alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the solution is simple, just don't drink alcohol. So that's not what we're going to be discussing in this video. In this video, we're going to be talking about type number 2, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But because that's a mouthful to say, I'm just going to use that term and fatty liver interchangeably. So that's what it is. It's an accumulation of excess fat in the liver. Everybody has some liver fat, but it's when it's excessive, usually over 5% of your liver, is when it's called fatty liver disease. And it comes in stages. The first stage is what I just mentioned, NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, when there's just excess fat in the liver, but there's no inflammation yet. After that, the next stage is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Anything ending in the suffix itis means inflammatory. So at this point, the liver is not just fatty, but fatty and inflamed. The next stage is fibrosis, and that is the beginning of scar tissue on the liver. Imagine you have a scar on your forearm. It creates a scab. Now the scab is not as smooth as your real skin, but it holds the skin together. And that's what's starting to happen in the liver. And fibrosis is just the beginning of that. By the time it's advanced, it's actually called cirrhosis, which means there's scarring all over the liver. There's fat, scarring, and inflammation. At this point, the liver is losing a lot of its function, but it's not completely failed yet. That's the final stage, which is liver failure. At this point, there's inflammation, fat, scarring, and none of the liver's functions are working. Not blood detoxification, not blood sugar balance, not any of the other things. Because the liver is failing, it's often followed by multi-system failure within a matter of hours, days, or even weeks. As for symptoms, when you're in the very early stages of fatty liver disease, and even in the early stages of the next stage, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, there may be zero symptoms. Once you get to the more advanced, like the middle stages, not advanced, you start to develop symptoms. The most common symptoms are fatigue and discomfort in your abdominal cavity. In even later stages, other symptoms come along. Things like loss of appetite, jaundice, which is the yellowing of your skin and your eyes. You also have dark urine, pale stool, abdominal bloating, brain fog, and itchy skin. Now that you know what fatty liver is, let's talk about the ways to reverse them from a nutritional perspective. There are 5 major things that you need to do that will help you with your fatty liver disease. You don't need to do them all, by the way. Any one of these will help with your fatty liver. The more of these you can do, the better off you're going to be. But even just doing one of them will help your fatty liver. The first thing you can do is normalize your calories. If you're currently overweight, simply losing weight will help. And what method you use to lose weight doesn't matter. Whether it's intermittent fasting, portion control, vegan diet, Mediterranean diet, Okinawa diet, paleo diet, doesn't matter. All types of fat loss work. One meta-analysis found that a loss of only 8 pounds, which is 3.61 kilograms, decreased liver fat by 18.5%. Very, very significant. Again, the method didn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. Portion control, keto diet, Mediterranean, intermittent fasting, doesn't matter. Another meta-analysis showed that a weight loss, yes, they used weight loss, not even fat loss, of over 7% of a person's body weight reduced their liver fat by 20.5%. So normalizing your calories, but any method that you like, will help your fatty liver. That is secret number 1. Secret number 2 is optimizing your fiber intake. In one study, researchers recruited 28 people with fatty liver and divided them into 2 groups. Group number 1, they received 12 grams of fiber on top of what they were already eating. Group number 2 received 24 grams of fiber on top of what they were already eating. After 8 weeks, group number 1 reduced their liver fat by 17%, group number 2 reduced it by 7%. So more fiber is helpful. Now if you're wondering, how much fiber? If you're a non-diabetic, it should be 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. So if you eat 2,000 calories a day, it should be about 28 grams of fiber. If you eat 3,000 calories per day, 42 grams of fiber, and so on. If you are a diabetic, you need more. You need between 17 and 20 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories per day. Now, if you're wondering, what are the best fiber sources? The first thing that usually jumps to mind is vegetables, but that's incorrect. Vegetables are a source of fiber, but not a good source of fiber. The best sources of fiber, in my mind, have more than 5 grams of fiber per serving. There's not a single vegetable that meets that criterion. But here are some foods that do meet those criteria. Beans. All beans are good, whether it's white kidney beans, red kidney beans, etc. The king of beans, however, in terms of fiber intake is black beans. They are the richest source of fiber. Outside of beans, chickpeas, peas, lentils. The fruit family, especially berries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. Okay. As for dried fruits, prunes, dates, dried apricots, and figs are very rich in fiber, and pseudograins, things like buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, and so on. These are all very rich sources of fiber with more than 5 grams of fiber per serving. Now, if you're wondering, how does fiber help improve liver fat? There are 3 major mechanisms. One mechanism is, this is about to get technical, it decreases the activity of what's called lipogenic enzymes. What does that mean? The word lipo, the prefix lipo means fat. Genic means creation. Enzymes just means, well, proteins that speed up chemical reactions in the body. So basically, it decreases the activity of fat-producing enzymes. Okay? Less activity of those means less fat, including the liver. That's one mechanism. A second mechanism is that fiber is anti-inflammatory. But not just fiber, because we never eat fiber in isolation. Fiber comes in things like blackberries, things like blueberries. So it's really the combination of fiber and antioxidants that is anti-inflammatory. And again, remember, the next stage of fatty liver is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is inflammatory. So this is very helpful towards preventing and reducing inflammation. And a third mechanism is fiber makes you feel fuller longer, which makes it an indirect effect because, again, the number one secret is calories. If fiber makes you feel fuller longer, you'll have less food and you'll have your food later. Thereby, it helps you reduce your calories. So there are 2 direct effects and 1 indirect effect. Secret number 3, saturated fat. Now, in my other books, for example, my book called High Cholesterol Reversal Secrets, I explain how saturated fat is no better and no worse than monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fat. For fat loss, the composition of the fat doesn't matter, whether it's polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated. Your ratio of carbs to fats doesn't matter. As long as calories are equal, all diets are equally good. So for fat loss, that's true. For high cholesterol, that's true. For liver fat, that is not true. The composition of the fat in your diet matters a lot. So in one study, researchers recruited 61 people with fatty liver. They were divided into 2 different groups. Group number 1 ate a muffin that contained 20 grams of saturated fat on top of the regular diet. Group number 2 ate a muffin that contained 20 grams of polyunsaturated fat on top of the regular diet. The calories in the muffins were both identical. After 8 weeks, group number 1 that ate the saturated fat muffin, their liver fat increased by 53%. The other group, their liver fat decreased by 2%, which means that despite identical calories, the composition of the calories matters a lot for fatty liver, but not for cholesterol and not for fat loss. Another study showed very similar results. In this study, researchers recruited 39 people with fatty liver and were divided into 2 groups. Group number 1 ate a muffin that contained about 45 grams of saturated fat on top of the regular diet. Group number 2 ate a muffin that contained about 55 grams of polyunsaturated fat on top of the regular diet. After 7 weeks, group number 1 increased their liver fat by 56%. Group number 2 increased their liver fat by only 5%. What does that tell us? It reinforces the message that yes, calories matter, but also the composition of the calories also matters. Now, why might that be? Why is there such a difference between polyunsaturated fat and saturated fat despite calories being identical? There are a few different explanations. Explanation number 1 is that polyunsaturated fats promote fat burning in the liver. Now, don't get excited, this is just in the liver. This helps burn liver fat, not body fat. By contrast, saturated fats are more likely to be stored as fat inside the liver. Another mechanism is that there are polyunsaturated fats that are both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. The anti-inflammatory ones are specifically omega-3s, but there is also pro-inflammatory polyunsaturated fatty acids. However, all saturated fats are pro-inflammatory. Polyunsaturated fats also reduce the number of free radicals that you produce, but saturated fats only increase the number of free radicals that you produce. Polyunsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. They create more fluid cell membranes, which help with cell-to-cell communication. Saturated fats are, of course, stiff, solid at room temperature, and of course at body temperature. And so because of that, they create stiff cell membranes that decrease cell-to-cell communication. Secret number 4, sugar. Now, I already feel the need to start apologizing to you because I've taken away something you already really enjoy, saturated fat. Now, I'm unfortunately going to have to say some bad things about sugar. As it comes to diabetes, this is controversial, but I've discussed how sugar independently does not increase or predispose you to diabetes. It also has no effect on fat loss, assuming it's within your caloric budget. But it does have an impact on your fatty liver, even if calories are low. In one study, 29 people with fatty liver were divided into two groups. Group number 1 reduced their sugar consumption from 9.9% of their total calories to 1.1%. Group number 2 reduced their sugar consumption from 13.1% to 11.8%. After 8 weeks, group number 1 reduced their liver fat from 25.5% down to 17.7%. Group 2 only reduced their liver fat from 19.5% to 18.8%, a negligible amount. Secret number 5, protein. Eat more protein. Or rather, I should say, eat an adequate amount of protein, but lots of people with fatty liver, in fact, the vast majority, undereat protein. And when they realize what is an adequate level of protein, they think that's a high protein diet. That's not a high protein diet, that's a normal protein diet. It's just that they were unknowingly and not intentionally on a low protein diet to begin with. So let's talk about protein. In one study, 37 people with fatty liver were divided into two groups. Group number 1, 30% of their total calories came from animal protein. They ate things like chicken, beef, pork, and so on. Group number 2, 30% of their calories came from plant protein. They ate things like lentils, beans, chickpeas, tofu, etc. After 6 weeks, both groups reduced their liver fat. Group number 1 reduced their liver fat by 48%. Group number 2 reduced it by 35.7%. The message is protein is good, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. There's a slight superiority to animal protein, but even if you get plant protein, still very good. Now, if you're wondering, how much protein do I need? Your protein requirements depend on 3 major factors. In no particular order, it's your body weight. The heavier you are, the more protein you need to support yourself. 2, your age. Are you over 60 or under 60? People over 60 require more protein because their absorption of it is lower. And 3, your activity levels. Are you sedentary? Are you doing cardio only? Are you doing strength training only? Or are you doing strength plus cardio? These are the 3 factors that determine your protein requirements. Now, I can't go into all those details, if this then that, in this video, but I've done that in a different video. Plus, I have a protein calculator in the description below. If you click on that, you'll be able to plug in all your details and it'll tell you exactly how much protein you specifically need. And if you're wondering, what are the best protein sources? Bar none, it's meat, fish, and seafood. They all contain a lot of protein. Now, there are a couple of vegetarian sources that are good, and even vegan sources like tofu, tempeh, as well as egg whites and whey protein powder. Those are your best protein sources because they all contain 30 grams of protein per serving or more. There's also grade B protein, which is things like chickpeas, beans, lentils, stuff like that. And there's grade C protein. Things like eggs are not a very rich protein source. One medium egg has about 6 grams of protein. One large egg has about 9 grams. Cheese. One slice of cheese or 1 cube of cheese has about 5 or 6 grams of protein. Milk. 1 glass of milk only has 9 grams of protein. So these are all okay sources of protein, but not great. These are what I call grade C protein. And of course, vegetables. Vegetables are great for many things, but protein is not one of those things. So eat them for other reasons, but don't eat them because you expect to get a lot of protein out of them. Now, mechanisms. How does having a normal protein diet help you reduce your liver fat? There are a few different ways to do it. One is that it's hard to make fat out of protein. There are 3 major macronutrients, that's carbs, fats, protein. Now, fat, dietary fat, is very easy to make into liver fat, so logical. Carbs are not as easy as fat, but way more difficult to make into protein than fat. And thirdly, protein is very, very difficult to convert into fat. It could happen, but it's extremely difficult. It almost never happens. Another mechanism is simple. Protein just replaces carbs and fats. You only have so much room in your stomach, and if it's occupied by protein as opposed to carbs or fats, well then that's good. Another mechanism is insulin sensitivity. Insulin resistance is one of the primary drivers of fatty liver, of the accumulation of liver fat. Protein uniquely is helpful for insulin sensitivity. So having a higher protein diet than you have now, which is probably an adequate protein diet, is very good for insulin sensitivity. Also, protein reduces the enzymes that store fat in the liver. Lastly, there is the indirect mechanism of protein, which is of the 3 macronutrients, again, carbs, protein, fat, protein is the most filling of the 3. And again, the number 1 secret is calories. If protein makes you feel full longer, just like fiber, it helps you reduce the amount of food you're eating besides that meal. If you like this information, I have a newsletter with lots more information just like this. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll give you access to our newsletter and you can always unsubscribe. Thank you and goodbye.